back to Building Families in the Faith. We're Brian and Rebecca Johnson, and we're thrilled that you are with us this morning.
Absolutely.
Or today.
Yes. Whatever time it is.
It'll be, anyhow. We are continuing to talk about divorce and the main keys for it, main reasons for it. Before that, let's see some Bible scriptures here. In Genesis chapter 2, verse number 24, we see, "Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and shall be one flesh." Now remember, as God is saying this to Adam and Eve, they don't have a father and mother, but he is instilling, he's teaching, he's showing Adam and Eve the importance of marriage. First of all, that there'll be one flesh there, but also Adam and Eve will have their children, and they will need to understand and teach their kids to leave and cleave.
Leave and cleave.
Leave and cleave, wonderful thing. But unfortunately, a lot of families don't get that. A lot of kids don't get that. A lot of in-laws don't get that, and that is why in-laws is one of the main reasons for divorce, is because we don't go back to what God originally intended for marriage, is of one flesh of a man and a woman, without the interference. Now, of course, as godly parents, we should always be available. We should always be there to help. We should always be a counseling help to our kids, but we should not be a hindrance to our kids. And oftentimes what we consider to be helpful, if not requested, is not helpful.
No.
So anyhow, that's another subject for another day. That's not our topic for today necessarily. We'll possibly come back to it in a second. But also in Mark chapter 10, in verse number 9, we see, "What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder." And we make these vows today in our wedding vows, but it is something that God commanded. It's something that God said. As we make our vows to God at the wedding altar, it's something that should be for a lifetime. And unfortunately, so many people are not taking that seriously. No, they say the vows, and unfortunately, so many people today, they change the vows to take that out of the vows. But the vows are supposed to be till death do us part. And the vows are supposed to be to God, and the vows are supposed to be something that we take seriously, that we will never break.
Yes. So we want to really cover what are those key moments in life, because if you know what's coming, you prepare a little bit better. Life is always going to have a curveball in it, okay? Life will always have a surprise set of circumstances that you weren't planning on. I don't know anyone who's living their plan A life.
Right.
Anywhere. We are all living plan B, C, D, E, F, G, what it could be.
We all at one point in our life wanted to be a billionaire.
Yeah.
And,
we may owe billions, but not own them.
Yeah.
So we want to kind of give you the stages of life. We've talked about the main key reasons for divorce already, but what are the points in life where we are the weakest and Satan can really hit us strong at that moment? So let's discuss some of those moments so you can be aware.
Well, the stats show that what we call the 7-year itch, between 5 and 8 year is the highest rate of divorce, and there's a few reasons for that, and we'll go into some of that in a little bit. The second highest rate is the first year, the first and second year of marriage, and then the other highest rate after that is around the 20-year mark. And anyhow, they all come around when there's a major transition.
Yes.
Obviously, when you first get married,
it's all flowers and sunshine and amazing, and then the honeymoon ends. You have to go to work.
Reality hits. Especially we Christians, and especially Christians who are doing it the right way, who are not living together prior to marriage and all that kind of stuff. We have never lived together, and that's a good thing, obviously. That's biblical. That's the way it should be. That's the best way. Those who have lived together prior to marriage,
you have your own set of issues.
You have the, I don't remember the numbers right now, but I think it's 70% of you will end up in infidelity. And so it's not worth it. But The first year of marriage, the first 2 years of marriage, it's a lot of things that you're getting used to. It's a lot of things that you have never had to deal with. You're living together. You're together. Of course, you're going to work and that kind of stuff, but still, you're together a whole lot more than you were before. And so it's a transition. Every major transition in marriage, Satan will use to attack and to try to destroy that marriage. And so the first transition, although it's not the biggest divorce rate, it is the second, the transition of the actual marriage.
Yes.
And so the first 2 years are very high in divorce rates because of the first transition, or because it's a major transition in your life.
You got married, you're in love, you've done it right, you've not lived together. If you have lived together, you have other issues that you're going to have to deal with majorly and quickly. You need to deal with them. But if you've done it right, you suddenly realize, guess what? When you wake up, you are not a Hallmark beauty. Your breath stinks. He can't find the hamper. It's like totally impossible. I don't understand what it is about men, but they literally cannot find the hamper. That's okay. There isn't a man out there that can find the hamper. You're fine. You find out that you didn't think the same way about everything. You grew up differently. You're actually taking two very different lives, and you're trying to merge a whole lot of differences, and it can get very frustrating. And suddenly you have that first fight, and you think, oh, did I make a mistake? No, you didn't make a mistake. You're normal. But unfortunately today, we're not preparing young people to understand that you're normal. Fighting is normal, guys. Nobody has a picture-perfect marriage, even your pastor.
As you merge plywood, as you merge two things together, you get splinters.
Yes.
But if you ever try to take it apart, you'll completely destroy it. You will have difficulties in your marriage. Life has difficulties. That's a part of life, part of marriage. The issue is you have to understand that God has commanded and God has ordained that marriage be for a lifetime. And anything that's going to last, you need to fight for. You need to work at. Any relationship that's going to work, it needs to be worked. It needs to be, it's a job. It's something that you need to develop. Your health, yes. You need to work at it. Your endurance in your sports, you need to work at it. Anything that you want to accomplish, it needs to be worked at, or it's not going to come to fruition. And that's the problem is that we think, oh, we got married in love, and it's just going to last
love
off
conquers all.
It's just going to, and if you work your love, it will, but you have to work at it. It's just like anything else. I loved playing sports when I was younger, and at one point I could jump a little bit. At one point I could do certain skills, but I didn't work at it after a certain point. And today, if I were to get that ball, volleyball was my favorite sport at that point. If I were to get a volleyball today, I can still play a little bit, but it's nowhere what I used to do. Why? Because I haven't been working at it. And so your marriage, it will be as good as you make it.
Yes.
It will not be as good as the people in the marriages. It will be as good as you work it to be.
Right.
As much as you practice, let's say, or as much as you invest in your marriage, and that's how strong or how good your marriage will be. So any transition, and every transition, Satan will use to attack your marriage. The first one that we mentioned there is, of course, just the process of getting married. So the first 2 years of marriage is the second highest rate of divorce. The second highest rate is that second time.
First highest rate.
Highest rate is the 7-year itch. And I think this is for a lot of things. I think a lot of marriages, when they do start off, they try. They try to work things, but then they get tired of working things.
Yes.
But also, within those 7 years, a lot of marriages have their first child or second child. And when they're babies, there's not that conflict as much of child rearing.
Right.
And one of the biggest issues of divorces is how you rear your children, or the conflict of child rearing. And so that 7-year itch for a lot of people, the reason is because as you're starting to rear your kids, you're starting to understand that your philosophies are not the same.
Yes. You haven't pre-planned. You are not on the same page. Inevitably, one of you is a disciplinarian and one of you is a softie. It's just the way it is. And kids are smart. Parents are dumb. Kids are smart. Kids figure out real quick who the soft one is, and they start pitting you against each other.
Yes.
And if you have not made a game plan, and eventually we're going to get to that game plan, what you need to do. But if you haven't made a game plan, your kids will rip you apart. Kids are awful little boogers.
In that first 2
But
years,
they can be wonderful.
they won't pit you against each other. But as it gets to your 7-year marriage, as they're 4 years old, or as they're starting
You
to
hit those
see
terrible twos on, and you haven't reared them.
who does what, and who. You can have two disciplinarians, and if you're not together,
Yes.
One will discipline about this and one will discipline about that, and you'll still be conflicting about what you're disciplining about or how you're disciplining, and so many things like that. So
let me say this too. Part of this also, for ladies, you get into childbearing, you have that first baby, and you realize, oh, this is way more work than it looked like it would be. And this can actually prevent you from actively having a relationship with your husband physically and emotionally.
For a fear of another child. And although we hate to think of it that way.
You don't flat out say, I don't want another baby right now, but you
Right.
don't want another baby right now.
Right.
Because you're a little overwhelmed. Most parents today are not training their own children, their adult children, how to deal with the babies coming. You get into it and you have no idea what's happening. You are flying blind, and unfortunately, this generation tends to run to their friends who also are flying blind, and it's literally the blind leading the blind into chaos. Our children are in chaos and our homes are in chaos. So men are like, well, why are you no longer emotionally responding to me? Why aren't we being physical anymore? And the wife is thinking, I don't want another little monster. I can't take it, because no one's helped her. You don't have to have a monster. You might think right now, oh my gosh, they're all going to be horrible. You don't have to. We had wonderful children, and our experience was fantastic, and we're going to share how to do that in the future.
You can have cute monsters too, you know.
But I am warning you that this 7-year itch, this moment, there's a lot of things going on. We're going to help you with it, but be warned, Satan will pull the guns at this point. And it's interesting because this also then starts to feed in with the in-laws. When do in-laws get the most messing into your lives? When there are grandkids.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, you want to discipline your grandkids, and all of a sudden, the parents who discipline you are like, don't do that. Okay, we're hoping that at some point here soon, we will be grandparents. We are not yet, but we are in-laws. And you know what? Already as an in-law, I'm learning I've got to keep my mouth shut. Sometimes I want to say things and I can't say anything. I have to keep my mouth shut. But do know that when grandkids come in, there are some grandparents that just can't keep their finger out of the pie.
Right.
And so that also contributes to this. So you have a lot of things coming into play when those little cute grandbabies come in. Now, when they get old and sassy, grandparents don't want to have anything more to do with them. And you don't have to worry about that. Then they're yelling at you for rearing your kid wrong. But so you can see how that can play then into divorce. The parents messing in and driving one or the other spouse crazy.
Right.
So this is all part of that 7-year itch. Okay, what is our next?
Your
pitfall?
20 years is your third biggest divorce rate. And of course, there's a lot of things that can be happening at 20 years. Often, your career is hitting pretty good at that point, or you're doing a transitional in your career. Sometimes, if you had your kids right off the bat,
like we did,
your kids are leaving the house, or you're going off to college.
Yes.
So at 18, they're leaving the house. They're going off to college when they're 18. So if you had your kids when 2 years of marriage, you had your first kid. Your first kid is going off to college. So there's a lot of things that can be happening here at the 20-year mark. But again, it's a transition. Whether it's a business transition, whether it's a kid leaving the house transition for college, or so many other things that can be happening, it's normally it's a transition.
Yes.
Or it can be a complacency issue.
Yes.
You've gotten.
You feel like you have it in the bag.
Right.
You got this marriage thing down.
Right.
Don't need to work at it.
Or also the midlife crisis for many people.
Yes.
You're hitting your
When
certain
you hit
ages,
your 40s,
and
45,
you're no longer
50.
satisfied with whatever. You feel like you need something new, but it's a transition in your mindset at that point. The midlife crisis, as we call it. So there's a lot of things that Satan will bring in and every transition he'll attack and he'll try to destroy our marriages. But be aware, if we're aware of the four main pitfalls that he will use against us, and aware of any transition, as you're starting to see that there's going to be a transition, prepare for it.
Yeah.
You know the kids are going to leave the house at some point.
They have to. Grow up, ladies. They have to go away.
At least biblically, they should.
Yes. And one of the biggest issues, and we are in that third rate now, okay? We've come into that third zone. And that third zone, it isn't just my first kid went off to college.
Right.
We're talking a general period of time here in which children are going to college and getting married. When your children get married, we've just been through this. All three of our sons are now married. When that's a shock. Like, you literally just lost those kids to a woman. Like, they're not yours anymore, and you suddenly really, really, really realize they're not yours anymore. So that can be a huge shock.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you haven't been working on your marriage,
oh yeah, you can look and go,
the wife has invested so much in the kids and child rearing, or at least has her focus has been in the child, even if they haven't reared them.
Right, exactly. They think they have.
Right. When the children leave, then who is this fella?
Yeah.
I don't know him. I know the kids. I've been taking care of them, but who's this guy?
And I would say here, be careful about all the activities. Your kid doesn't need to be in every single activity out there on the planet. Enough. Spend some time with your spouse, because guess what? All that busyness in high school, it will end. And you will just stand there and have an identity crisis. Midlife crisis is not for men only. I think we kind of joke about it as a manly thing, but women go through a severe midlife crisis,
especially when the kids are leaving the house.
Leave.
Yeah.
So do be aware. We're going to talk a lot in detail about this in future episodes. So we're going to get you through it, but you need to be aware.
And we're for help. You know, sports programs are wonderful to help develop the character of your kids. So we're not obviously against getting them involved in a music program, getting them involved in a sports program. The issue is when the kids are so out of the house that we have no contact with them. We're no longer rear them.
And we're in taxi drivers.
The kids, and we today we give them their own cars, or we let them use our cars. We're not even driving them anymore. Once they hit 16, they start going to their own things on their own.
And it's all a problem. We're going to discuss this.
Yes, we'll get into all this later. Yeah. But there's no unity. And that's the thing. The primary unity, of course, is this, the husband and wife. But you also have to, as they're growing up, if you're going to influence them, if you're going to help them, if you're going to be able to counsel them, you have to maintain their heart.
Yes.
And there's no way you're going to maintain their heart if you never see them.
Right. I want to, before our time is up, there is one final time of transition that might shock people of divorce. And that is?
Retirement age.
Yeah. You would think after being married that long, it would all be beautiful.
When you retire, you go home, and now you're 24 hours a day together. And you're not used to that. You're not used to seeing that same person 24 hours, and you're not used to not having something, especially God created the man to work. And we might, this is not the main subject for our group here, but for what we're doing here in the marriage, but God created man to work, and so we need to be working our whole lives. Even in retirement, okay, you don't need to be working a job necessarily, but we need to be working. We need to be working for God. We need to be working for, even if it's not for money, even if it's not a salary, we need to be doing something. We need to be volunteering at the church. We need to be doing this and that, because that's what God created us for. And when a man retires, especially a man, when a man retires and he stops working, he's no longer fulfilling what God created him to fulfill, part of it. And there will, with that, of course, the togetherness and the lack of fulfillment in the man's life will also generate another
a lot of animosity.
Yes, another time of high divorce.
We've seen this in our own parents' lives as retirement is looming, and they have extended days off or something. They just work part-time, and you can see the tension building. I have so much. You can hear my mom. I have so much to do. He's home. I can't get anything done. And I'm sure if there's an older couple listening, they're laughing right now, because it can be very grating on a marriage, and it's shocking because you would think after being together through so much, through so many years, you've successfully weathered so many storms, and then you have this blissful, we're going to retire, and then all of a sudden it's like, nails on a chalkboard. And it's not as wonderful as it appeared. And I remember when my dad first retired, and then he went right back to work at another job. So, retirement can be a little tricky. So, anyway, these are the things that we need to...
Any transition. So with transition, prepare. Be aware and work the marriage. Fight for the marriage. Keep that strong. Thanks again for being with us today on Building Families in the Faith, or Building Families of Faith. And we'll see you next week.